Dancers, they put on what I believe is like some of the most.
The arena roared with thunderous applause. Taylor Swift stood under dazzling lights, smiling as thousands of fans chanted her name. But backstage, just minutes before the encore, her hands trembled as she read a message from her mother's nurse. The words blurred as tears welled up. Her heart sank. It wasn't the first time Taylor had walked back on stage hiding a storm inside. For years, behind every glowing performance, there was a secret pain. One that began the day her mother whispered a terrifying truth through trembling lips. It's cancer. Andrea Swift wasn't just her mom. She was her anchor, her road companion, her fiercest protector. And now, Taylor was slowly watching her fade. This is not a story about chart-topping hits or celebrity gossip. This is about the quiet heartbreak behind one of the world's brightest stars. The one chapter she never put into lyrics, until now. So what really happened to Taylor Swift's mother?
Before the stadiums, the Grammy speeches, and the global headlines, Taylor Allison Swift was just a little girl with big eyes and bigger dreams. Born on December 13, 1989 in West Reading, Pennsylvania, Taylor grew up surrounded by pine trees on her family's Christmas tree farm, a place where imagination ran wild and melodies quietly took root. From a young age, she was drawn to words. Her mother would later recall how Taylor, at just 7 years old, would scribble rhymes into notebooks, humming tunes only she could hear. Encouraged by her family, especially Andrea, she picked up a guitar and began to write songs that carried the weight of someone far older than her years. Her breakout came early. At 14, Taylor convinced her parents to relocate to Nashville, the heart of country music, so she could chase her dream. Andrea was the engine behind the move, arranging meetings, sitting through auditions, staying up late rehearsing lyrics. Scott, her father, left behind his position as a Merrill Lynch executive and became the silent investor in his daughter's future. It didn't take long for Nashville to take notice. Taylor's raw storytelling and emotional honesty cut through the industry noise. Her debut album hit in 2006, and suddenly, the teenage girl with curly hair and cowboy boots became the voice of a generation. But fame didn't change her essence. With every hit, Love Story, You Belong With Me, All Too Well, Taylor bared her soul. Her fans didn't just listen to her songs, they felt like they knew her. Yet behind the global success was a woman who always stood in the wings, Andrea. She wasn't just Taylor's mother, she was her protector, her road manager, her grounding force. From the early radio station visits to world tours, Andrea was there. She made sure Taylor ate, she carried her extra shoes, she turned down interviews when Taylor was too tired to speak. And Taylor never forgot. She wrote songs like The Best Day as love letters to her mother. She brought her to red carpets. In every acceptance speech, Andrea's name was the first. But as Taylor's fame grew, so did the shadows. Whispers about burnout, pressure, heartbreak followed her. And then, in 2015, Taylor Swift made a rare personal revelation. Her mother had been diagnosed with cancer. Suddenly, the girl who had given so many people comfort through her music was facing a loss that not even lyrics could soothe. The next chapter in her story wouldn't be about charts or trophies. It would be about survival, of love, of strength, and of watching the person who gave you everything begin to slip away. Before she was known to millions as Taylor Swift's mom, Andrea Gardner Swift was a woman who lived life on her own terms, poised, intelligent, and fiercely protective. Born and raised in Texas, Andrea came from a background rooted in discipline and grace. She worked in marketing at an investment firm, a job she excelled at with sharp instincts and natural warmth. But everything changed the day she held her newborn daughter in her arms. From that moment on, Andrea's world revolved around Taylor. When Taylor showed an early fascination with music, Andrea didn't just encourage her, she became her co-pilot. She was the one who noticed Taylor's ability to write lyrics that seemed too mature for her age. When other parents were enrolling their children in piano lessons or ballet, Andrea was driving Taylor to sing at local fairs, talent shows, and karaoke contests. She wasn't a typical stage mom. She was quieter, more strategic, someone who watched from the sidelines but pulled every string when needed. At just 11 years old, Taylor was determined to get a record deal. Andrea, knowing the odds were stacked against them, still drove her daughter to Nashville. Together, they visited music labels, handing out CDs that Taylor had burned herself. Andrea didn't push her daughter into anything. She simply created the space for her to be relentless. The move to Nashville wasn't easy. It meant uprooting their family, sacrificing comfort and stability. But Andrea believed. She believed in the little girl with bright eyes and a notebook full of dreams. In interviews, Taylor would often describe her mom as her best friend, the person who stayed up with her during songwriting sessions, who calmed her nerves before shows, and who protected her like a lioness when the industry tried to chew her up. One particular story stayed with Taylor for years. At age 14, after a difficult meeting with a record executive who had dismissed her as too green, Taylor sat in the car holding back tears. Andrea didn't speak. She simply reached into her purse, handed Taylor a notebook, and said, "Prove him wrong." That notebook would go on to hold the lyrics of her first hit. Over the years, as Taylor's fame skyrocketed, Andrea remained the constant presence. She traveled on every tour, kept her daughter grounded amidst the chaos, and helped her navigate a brutal media landscape. Andrea chose not to stand in the spotlight, but Taylor often dragged her into it out of love and gratitude. Fans first met Andrea in The Best Day, a home video montage turned song, where Taylor captured the innocence of childhood and the warmth of a mother's embrace. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a window into the quiet strength that had shaped her. But Andrea was more than a mother behind the curtain. She had her own spirit. She laughed easily, gave fierce hugs, and had a stubborn streak that Taylor inherited. In private moments, she was deeply emotional, once breaking down backstage after Taylor performed a vulnerable song about heartbreak, not because of the boy, but because she couldn't bear to see her daughter hurting. Then came the signs: fatigue, weight loss, subtle changes in Andrea's energy. She brushed them off, saying it was age, exhaustion from travel. But Taylor knew her mother's rhythm. Something was wrong. Andrea resisted going to the doctor at first. Like many mothers, she didn't want to burden her children. But eventually, after Taylor insisted, tests were done, and the results would change everything. Andrea Swift had cancer.
The news came like a thunderclap in the quiet. Taylor was in the middle of planning her 1989 world tour when Andrea, after persistent urging from her daughter, finally agreed to undergo a full health screening. It was meant to be routine, just a checkup to ease Taylor's mind. But when the results arrived, the air in the room thickened. Andrea had cancer. Taylor didn't cry right away. She listened, nodded, and held her mother's hand with a grip that trembled. The doctors were vague at first, offering treatment options, encouraging optimism. But behind their words, Taylor heard something else: uncertainty. It was breast cancer, and though treatable, it would be a long, brutal road. In a rare act of public vulnerability,
Taylor shared the news in a heartfelt Tumblr post in April 2015. She wrote, not as a global superstar, but as a daughter, scared, uncertain, and aching for control. I'd like to keep the details of her condition and treatment plans private, she wrote, but she wanted you to know. That simple sentence revealed a truth so many children of cancer patients understand. Sometimes the strongest people in your life are the ones quietly slipping away. Andrea began treatment while Taylor was on tour. But instead of pulling away, Taylor became even more present. Between shows, she flew home for chemo sessions. On stage, she smiled, danced, and gave the crowd her all. But offstage, her world was collapsing. And then, just when the family thought they had turned a corner, came another cruel twist. In 2019, during the filming of Taylor's documentary, Miss Americana, Andrea's condition worsened. Tests revealed that a brain tumor had developed, a complication from the cancer treatment, or perhaps an entirely new battle. This time, the prognosis was grimmer. Andrea's memory began to flicker, her energy drained. Some days, she didn't speak much at all. Taylor described the tumor as a very big part of our family's life right now. But no lyrics, no interviews, no statement could capture the weight of watching someone you love slip into confusion and pain. One moment haunted Taylor more than most. She had written a new song for Lover, a soft, aching ballad titled Soon You'll Get Better, featuring the Chicks. It was a raw letter to her mother, full of hope, fear, and resignation. But when she played it for Andrea, her mother sat in silence. Touched, yes, but also weary. Taylor later admitted, "It's hard to even sing it. It's too real." The woman who once shielded Taylor from the world now needed shielding herself. And for Taylor, who had always found strength in performance, it was the one time the stage felt like a betrayal. Because while she sang to millions, the one person who mattered most was fading just out of reach. It wasn't the kind of grief you prepare for. It was the slow, cruel kind, the one that erodes memory, connection, and presence. And Taylor, the master of words, could only watch as language failed them both.
There was no funeral, no black dresses, no crowds of mourners, but to Taylor, it felt like she had already said goodbye. It happened on a late afternoon in 2020. The tour had been canceled, the world was in lockdown, and Taylor had retreated to the quiet, staying by her mother's side in their Nashville home. Andrea had just finished another round of treatment. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but Taylor could sense something different. Something slipping beneath the surface. They were sitting in the living room, light filtering in through gauzy curtains. Taylor had her guitar in hand, softly playing the chords of The Best Day, a song she had written for her mom years earlier, a tribute to childhood, innocence, and the woman who made it all feel safe. Andrea was reclined, blanket over her knees, eyes closed but listening. When Taylor finished, there was a long silence. Then, softly, Andrea whispered, "That one was about me, right?" Taylor smiled, tears rising. "They're all about you," she replied. But Andrea didn't answer. She simply closed her eyes again, as if the music had gently carried her elsewhere. It was the first time her mother had failed to recognize the song immediately. And in that moment, Taylor knew in the way only daughters can, that something had changed forever. In the weeks that followed, Andrea became more distant. Some days she was lucid, laughing at old memories, recounting stories from the Christmas tree farm. Other days, she forgot where she was. She once asked Taylor when her next piano recital would be, as if she were 10 again. Taylor never corrected her. She just nodded, played along, and held her mother's hand. Those days were a living grief. There was no ceremony, no casket, but something sacred was ending. The vibrant woman who had once driven her across state lines, chasing dreams, was slowly vanishing in plain sight. In private, Taylor wrote journals, lyrics, voice memos. She captured the pain like she always had, through melody. But unlike heartbreak or fame, this pain didn't resolve in the chorus. It just lingered. One morning, Andrea didn't get out of bed. The family called the doctor, who said it was likely exhaustion, but Taylor knew it was more. She sat beside her, gently brushing her hair. For hours, they said nothing. When Andrea finally opened her eyes, she looked at her daughter, smiled faintly, and said, "You've made me so proud." Taylor wept, not because of the words, but because deep down she feared they might be the last. And maybe, in some way, they were. It wasn't death, but it was a goodbye, a slow, unfolding farewell, one that stretched over years and broke her heart one memory at a time. To the world, Andrea Swift was still alive, but to Taylor, the woman she knew, her best friend, her compass, her home, was gently slipping into a place beyond reach. No headlines captured it, no paparazzi snapped it, but in that quiet house, a daughter said goodbye to the brightest part of her world.
In the wake of her mother's illness, Taylor Swift changed, not just as an artist, but as a human being. The once relentless pace of her career slowed. After years of being in the spotlight, always moving, always creating, Taylor began choosing silence. She stepped back from award shows. She canceled appearances. Paparazzi who once captured her every errand now found nothing but closed doors and drawn curtains. For the first time in over a decade, she was still. Because now, her world was smaller. It wasn't about world tours or chart toppers. It was hospital rooms, home-cooked meals, afternoon walks through the garden with Andrea's hand in hers. Every smile from her mother became sacred, every moment without pain a gift. But the grief didn't swallow her, it transformed her. She poured it all into her music. Lover, Folklore, Evermore, 3 albums that stripped away the armor and exposed a woman grieving in real time. In Soon You'll Get Better, her voice cracked. In Marjorie, she paid tribute to her late grandmother, but the echo of Andrea's slow fading was unmistakable. And in The Archer, she asked the world, "Who could ever leave me, darling, but who could stay?" She was singing to fans, yes, but she was also singing to her mother, and maybe even to herself. Her songwriting shifted, no longer obsessed with breakups or fame, but with legacy, time, and the things we can't control. Critics called it her most mature work yet, but for Taylor, it wasn't about evolution, it was survival. Offstage, she became even more private. She fiercely protected Andrea's condition, refusing to give the press what they wanted. Instead, she spent birthdays at home, holidays in silence, and watched old family videos like sacred films. The girl who once sang about high school halls and cheer captains was now a woman grappling with mortality, loss, and love that outlasts memory. In interviews, she became more introspective. When asked about the future, she rarely mentioned music. Instead, she talked about presence, peace, and being with the people who matter while they still can remember who you are. And so Taylor continued, not because the pain faded, but because Andrea had taught her something deeper. That even as memory fades, love doesn't. And that maybe, just maybe, the truest legacy is not in what we achieve, but in who we hold on to while we still can.
Fame shines bright, but it can never outshine the quiet love of a mother. For Taylor Swift, success was never just about awards or records. It was about making one person proud. And as Andrea Swift slowly faded from the world she helped build, Taylor found herself holding on to every second, every smile, every story. She didn't need the world to understand. She just needed her mother to remember. We often speak of artists as immortal, but behind every stage, there are whispered prayers. Behind every hit song, there are tears the world will never see. For Taylor, the brightest spotlight only served to illuminate the shadows she was learning to live with. Perhaps Andrea Swift is still with her, not in full sentences or perfect memory, but in melody, in silence, in the spaces between. And maybe that's all any of us can hope for. That even when words fade, love will still hum in the background. What about you? Have you ever had to say goodbye, even when no one else knew you were grieving? If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to join us in exploring the untold stories behind the stars.